Welcome to The Crucible, Conversations for the Curious. I am Hamish, your host. This podcast is for anyone going through awakenings, trying to make sense of life, whether dark nights of the soul, needing to make life-changing decisions, struggling with addiction or critical illness, or simply realizing that their life as they know it is not aligned to values and purpose. You are not alone. You can get through this, I promise you. Life is far more beautiful on the other side. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode. I'm here today with Nirushka. Now, we've got a funny story. Can you tell everyone how we met, Nirushka?
Hi, Hamish, and hi everyone. I just want to first say thank you for having me on, and it's such a huge honor to be here. And thank you for providing the space for people. I think it's phenomenal because you give people a voice or a space for them to share their voice. So, yeah, I see that, and I want to honor that. But Hamish and I, well, we met a day after I had this thought, and the thought was, I really want to be able to speak. I want to share my voice. I want to share my story, and I want to help people. And then you appeared in my inbox on Facebook, and you invited me to your podcast, and that was a huge synchronicity for me. It was massive in my world, and it also just it signified that, oh yeah, I'm in the right place at the right time. So thank you.
It tickled me pink when you told me that. I thought it was so funny. Just that wonderful synchronicity, which when they start happening, we really do know that we're on the right journey, we don't we? It makes stuff easier.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you feel like, oh yeah, okay, I'm being supported, and I'm in the right place.
Brilliant. Right. Can you tell me a little bit about your story and how you came to your awakening and made sense of things, please?
Okay, so my story is quite convoluted, and there's a lot of twists and turns, but my awakening, I would say, really started in 2024. So it was a series of, it happened in a series of four, essentially over the past 4 years. And I think ever since the last one, it's just been this beautiful process of deepening with myself and deepening in relationship. And when I say relationship, I mean relationship to all things, and then to people as well. Um, and well, of course, it's not a picnic when you go through an awakening because you've truly realized where you've been. So I think my definition of awakening is sort of coming online for the first time and realizing that I've been in a state of complete unconsciousness, or I've been sleepwalking through my life, completely unaware of my thoughts, my conditioning, my patterns, my behaviors. And then all of a sudden, it's like this light bulb goes on. It's like this jolt of electricity that goes through you, and you realize, well, I'm plugged in, and things have got to change. And it's been like that for me, but on so many different levels. So in 2020, I was selling my house. I was in the process of selling my house. And I sat on the floor of my house, and it was kind of empty. And I was going through a box of old photos. And it took me back to my family home. And I started remembering everything that I experienced there with my father, and it was really difficult. But also the sense of having achieved a lot, within myself, and also within the realizations that I had, having come from this family. And I heard this voice, and the voice said, "You're finally free." And I got a sense, and I've been kind of psychic and intuitive my whole life, and I realized this when I was 4. But I felt this sense of overwhelming freedom and liberation. And it was a feeling I had never felt before. And I felt like selling the house. And that was another synchronicity, So I put the house on the market, and literally a week later, it was sold. And I thought, holy crap, I didn't expect it to go that quickly. And I thought, okay, I'm being supported in this whole process. And my family had this legacy of holding on to property, but really becoming identified with things and being attached to them. And so I knew I was selling this home that had been my little, cocoon of safety for such a long time. And I didn't really have that in my life prior. And I thought, okay, I know I'm letting this go, but I also feel this huge sense of liberation. And for the first time, embracing it instead of being fearful of it. The second awakening was, so I move house, and I'm in a long-term relationship with someone for 4 years, but I wasn't really sure about this relationship. And I thought, oh, well, I'm committing to this. And the only way I'm going to find out what happens is if I truly commit and say yes to it. So I move in with him. And I realized that we were playing a dynamic that was really based in my childhood trauma, which had its foundations in abuse and codependence. And even though I understood that, I really couldn't let it go. And I think I knew that for the entire duration of the relationship, but I couldn't get out. I didn't think I could get out. And I had suffered based on being abused from very little, all the way up to my 20s. My dad was a very violent, abusive man. So he would beat me really badly. And I realized that I was carrying all this stuff that other people didn't really experience. So it was this, I call it a personal hell, because that's what it was for me. Like, my body was in this state of static. I felt like there was static running through my body constantly, like there was this buzz, and like I couldn't connect with anything outside of that buzz. And later on, I realized that that was actually PTSD that I had and I couldn't break through from. And I had, on top of that, anxiety and depression. And I had all sorts of addictions. I would chain smoke as a means of coping, or eating really unhealthily. And my boyfriend at the time, we had this huge fight, and it was a violent argument, but it set off a panic attack. And my coping mechanism was to chain smoke, but something said, and it was this voice, and I call this voice the voice of truth. And this voice said, stay with it. It was this phrase that I made no sense to me. I hadn't heard it before, but it said stay with it. And in that moment, I felt compelled to listen, and I dropped to my knees and I sat down on the floor and I stayed with it. And I understood in that moment that I needed to be present with the sensations coming up in my body, and I could no longer escape what I was feeling. And it was amazing because I was terrified. So I had been terrified of these sensations before, and terrified of facing them because it felt like a breaking of sorts. If I felt it, I would be completely annihilated. And so I allowed myself to feel those sensations and to be present with them. And I was guided to use my breath in order to stay present. And I focused on different aspects or different parts of my body as the sensations moved. And what I noticed is that these sensations were taking me on a journey, and they had a pathway through my body. So it was almost like these sensations started telling me a story and building a picture of where they came from and how they got to be in my body in the first place. And I think the whole process, the first time round, took me a good 2 or 3 hours. And I just sat there, like glued to the floor for a few hours, just going through this process. But what it did is it took me to this pristine place of clarity that I had never felt before. And this was the first time that I didn't feel that overwhelming avalanche of emotions and sensation in my body. And it was just this complete space of peace. And I never thought that that would be possible. So, what I did after that was I used the relationship as a means of honing in this practice, or cultivating this practice. And I would sit every time I was triggered. I would sit with the sensations, and I would stay with it and be present. And I think it must have taken me a month. And after a month, I noticed that my PTSD symptoms completely disappeared. I mean, prior to this, I was on medication for a number of years for anxiety and depression, and my anxiety disappeared, and I didn't have a sense of depression or like wanting to crawl into my bed and hide. And I thought, okay, this is too good to be true, so I'm going to wait and see what happens. And I waited, and it was a month, it was 2 months, and still I had no PTSD or anxiety or depression that came back after that. So that was profound. And when I leaned into this piece, I realized, well, there's no need for me to stay in this relationship any further. So I found the courage to actually end that relationship, which was not serving me, and I moved on from there.
Wow, that is quite remarkable. And I got so many things I want to ask you about there. We need to come back to several of them. I
Mhm.
want to start with this I heard a voice, because that is a common theme, and I know many people, once they start having voices inside them, it's off to the loony bin. And it's explain what that concept of that voice is in your head, because I have that, and just curious to understand what your experience of it is, and how it makes you feel. I think that's probably quite important.
Thank you for that, Hamish. Well, I think that that voice, and I call it the voice of truth, but I feel like it's really the voice of intuition, and it's that inner knowing, that higher awareness that I think is innate in all of us. And for me, I realized that I've had that throughout my life. I would freak my family out. As I said, I was quite psychic, so I was in a sense connected to this knowing and intuition, and I knew I had different gifts and abilities than the people in my family. And I would say things as a little kid like, oh, this aunt is not going to be around for much longer, and a week or two later she would pass on. So at that point I realized that this was in me. I wasn't attuned to it, and I didn't really recognize it as a guidance system or a higher awareness that I was tapping into.
That makes sense. And so did you suppress that? Did you, as you grow over, find that grow over as you grew older, did you find that you sort of, it was frowned on, so you sort of squashed it or ignored it or tried to even run away from it?
It's so funny that you asked that question because I actually saw my aunt this weekend, and she was my preschool teacher. And I remember sitting in her classroom, and everyone, well, at school you have is it daily ring, where everyone shares a little bit of news that they have. And I was sitting in the circle with everyone, and everyone had a chance to kind of share their news. And my teacher and my aunt got to me, And I was talking about having conversations with other beings. And the entire class laughed, and I think I startled my aunt as well, and she was taken aback. And that was a very pivotal point. And I realized it was that at that point where I realized this is not really acceptable in society, and it's not safe to share this because there's ridicule around it, and so I'm gonna stifle that.
It's so sad when that happens, isn't it? I had a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago, and he said growing up, he was creative. He wanted to draw, he wanted to do music, he wanted to do this and that. And same kind of things, get a proper job, do this. And for years, he stifled it. And for years, he was dissatisfied. And I'm getting the same thing. You stifled it and were ultimately dissatisfied with things. You were looking and trying to make sense of things. And it's only when you acknowledge that gift, that intuition, that healing capacity, then you start to become whole again because you've disconnected, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I was always disconnected, since I was little, and I was trained into the disconnection, from what was going on around me. I mean, one of the first memories I have is of my mom and my dad screaming at each other, and my mom holding me in her arms. And I think I must have been one, but I realized I don't feel safe with these adults in my environment. I don't have safe, I don't feel like they're going to protect me. But I also realized that I couldn't be me. I couldn't be myself with them. And so I lived my life in this very disconnected way for as long as I can remember.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I think it's really sad that, I mean, children have to go for that attachment, don't they? Because if they're not able to be attached to their parents and get that love and support, they will die. So you have to have that attachment, and at the risk is you lose your authenticity, your gift of being creative and seeing spirit and sensing beyond. Um, and you have to shut that down so you can survive.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is really tragic, but
Mm,
I also love that it's very much woven into the hero's journey, which is exactly that part.
mm,
Path. It's coming from that place of having made that choice on a very subconscious level to disconnect from self in order to fit into your family and community, and then finding your way out of that, and the road that takes you down, and where
mm.
that essentially leads you. Yeah, and I've always been a fan of the underdog.
Yeah, I think that's great. And the hero's journey, it's massive, isn't it? It's Star Wars, it's Catcher in the Rye, it's Everdeen Katniss, it's Harry Potter. It is such a fundamental story of humanity, making sense, being afraid, taking that risk, going for it, and changing. You've had to change.
Absolutely.
I've had to change. Yeah.
Absolutely. Another thing that comes up from that, if I may, is it's this duality, right? So it's going from the one extreme, which is denial of self, and then it's going to the other extreme, which is acceptance, full acceptance, and then finding the middle path, the integration of those two,
Mm.
and living from the middle path, and which is an integrated state, and being able to fit into society but also hold on to your individuality. And I think that for me it's been really important for me to be able to do that. And I'm seeing how, I'm sort of, it's like walking a tightrope in every moment, because you're aware of that in every moment.
I want to go back to where you were about to pick up those cigarettes, your coping strategy, and you just got that sense that it was not this time. This time you were not allowed to cope. You had to do something different. I think that is an incredibly important point because I was drinking. That was my coping strategy. And it came to the point where I couldn't cope and no amount of alcohol could make me cope. So I had to stop coping. And face my fears or listen or whatever. What was the result of not coping and listening?
So, firstly, I just thank you for sharing that, and it's your journey has been amazing too. Breaking through the things that you had to break through, but the result of allowing myself not to cope anymore was a breaking down of the old system within me that was very much or had its roots in my childhood trauma. And it had its roots in abuse, but a whole archaic system that had come through or had been formulated through my ancestors, and that's what I realized is by actually staying with myself, I was doing something completely radical that no one in my family had been able to do up until that point. And I mean, I thought about it this morning, I was sort of mulling around all these memories, and I went back to my family home and growing up in violence and abuse and how it was normalized. So I was raised in a very small, tight knit Indian community in Johannesburg. And I really wanted someone to save me. Like I wanted someone, an adult, to say, hey, this is not on. There's something fundamentally wrong with this. And everyone turned it around and they said to me, so this was said, and I knew that it was messed up, so it was like, you shouldn't anger him, or just hide in your room, or don't rattle him, just allow him to do what he needs to do. And the message I got was, I need to shrink myself and make myself really invisible to fit in with someone who wasn't willing to acknowledge his stuff. Yeah.
Yep, I think what you did was, you know, utterly remarkable, and that's the coping strategy that you worked out as a child to make sense of. And I think, take my hat off to you. You, me, and anybody who's struggled has found a way to cope. You're a hero. In my book, you're a flipping hero. You didn't go mad. You didn't say, I can't cope and kill yourself. You survived. And I think as children, we have to survive. But then I think once we become adults, we have to, what you're doing, what you're saying, we have to look at who we were as the child, that
Mm-hmm.
archetype, that
Mm-hmm.
survival, those patterns, and go, they don't serve us as an adult. I don't need to fly off the handle when something upsets me. As an adult, I've got thoughts, patterns, new ways of thinking, so I can reprogram that. And I think what you're saying very much is you've looked at the child and gone, yeah, I love you as you are. I'm going to run the show because I've got your knowledge and my knowledge, that and all those years in between. And I think this is what I'm seeing in all these conversations I'm having is, when we dare to face those terrors and those horrors and those demons, they're just trying to help us. They're helping us to make sense. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think.
Absolutely. You mentioned the child, and I've started realizing, I think it would be within the past 2 years, how important the child is within us, and reparenting that child and giving that child a healthy maternal figure and a healthy paternal figure and a healthy protector. And then you, of course, are all of those for that child. And that changing that dynamic, and I think it's also is it family systems theory, but it really, like, reading about it and then implementing that in my life really helped me move forward. And as you say, coming from my adult self and realizing, but I don't have to respond this way to my own emotions anymore, and I don't have to respond to the world in this way anymore.
Yep, I think that's so important, isn't it? And when we do adult, and take responsibility and accountability for ourselves, life is so much easier. It's
Oh, absolutely.
unbelievable. You're not going to die from those fears and those shame and those demons. Life becomes easier. You're more grounded. It's everything is effortless, not easier. It's more effortless, and you become more resilient. I mean, yes, it's scary to have to do the work, but once you do, it's ongoing.
Mhm.
You can make sense of life, can't you? You can respond rather than react.
Absolutely. It's responding rather than reacting. Whereas when you're coming from the child self, it's, throwing tantrums and then reacting.
Mm.
But the adult self is always geared towards creative solutions. And I find myself, and I don't know if it's the same with you as well, but I find myself seeing a problem as play. It's almost like, oh, that's cool. Like it's a whole new challenge. And I get to test out my and play with my creative abilities and my abilities to problem solve. So, how can I bring a different energy to actually solve this problem and deal with it in a different way, in a way that I've probably never dealt with it before?
And what happens if you fail? What happens if you make a right mess of that creating and trying to make sense of that problem?
I think for me, this is like reparenting again, so it's going back to myself and saying, you know what, it's okay. Like you did your best, you messed up,
Mm.
but it's okay. And I love you, even though it didn't turn
Mm.
out the way you wanted it to,
Yep.
even though it didn't work out. We can find new things,
Mm.
but it's from that foundation of I have me, like I'm solid in myself, and I know that I have me as an ally, so going forward, um, I'm kind of unstoppable because I support me. I back myself to that degree. Has it been the same with you?
Yeah, it was a deliberately facetious comment or question, and yeah, for me the answer is exactly the same. It's like, oops, it didn't work. I'll just try something else. Like the guy who invented the light bulb, he didn't invent one; he had to get hundreds to get there. WD-40. It's called 40 because it took 40 times to get the right product. If
Yeah.
every entrepreneur or business person was embarrassed for their first failure, we would still be living in caves and clubbing each other over the head.
Mhm.
Um, it's okay
Absolutely.
to fail and just go, what went wrong, and then learn from it. But
It's kind of
yeah,
like toddlers. I mean, back to the child analogy, but it's
yeah,
like a toddler, like learning to walk, and
mm,
then he wobbles around and he stubs his toe and he falls down and he has a little cry, and then he's supported, and then he gets back up again and off he goes.
yeah, absolutely. And I like to think about that. You as a parent don't go, oh, you idiot, you fell over. You pick them up. But what do you say to yourself when you mess up? Oh, you idiot, Hamish. You've messed it up again. It's exactly the same to that child. You fool, you fell over. Don't do it again.
Mhm.
Just walk. We can't walk
Absolutely.
because everything we experience is new. Every single thing. We're all trying to make sense of a world. Yeah, madness. Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There was something else. I can't. There's something else. Off topic now. There was something else I was going to ask you on those lines because this is brilliant. This is really, really, really brilliant. Yeah, and I'm sharing stuff with you that I've realised the last 2 days. So I'll come back into that. What did I want to ask you about? Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I've been saying quite a lot at the moment, so I'd like you to pretend I am a listener and I'm stuck. I'm trying to make sense of things. I'm hearing what you're saying, and I want to overcome. I want to start listening to that voice. I want to start looking at that child and say, "Hey, it's okay." How would you encourage me to start on that journey of my own self-realization, or if we want a slightly less woo-woo word, start to grow up, become an adult, take responsibility?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight, and it definitely is a process. And initially when you're starting out, you're gonna have some. You're not gonna want to go there instantly, or you may feel triggered, And it's a gentle process of allowing yourself to surrender and accept your own uncomfortable, negative stuff and the thoughts and your own judgments that you have around whatever's happening in your body and whatever it is that you're experiencing. It's to just allow yourself to put that on pause, put the mind on pause and actually surrender to the body completely. So not thinking of it as, say, for example, PTSD or anxiety, not thinking of something as a label that we've given as a conceptual thing, and it's not in the mind. It's actually allowing the body to experience what it needs to experience. And for me, a simple thing I do, and I shared it earlier, it was around breathing. And like you can actually just shut off the world and just put your hands on your chest, or you can put one on your chest and one on your tummy and just breathe. And as you're breathing, just allowing yourself to drop into each of those sensations and just without judging, just allow yourself to notice what comes up and just gently breathe. And as you
So
do
you're
that, you suspend your judgments and you're just literally allowing sensation to be in your body.
okay. So your body is your guide.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's almost like, we, especially being in or living in a Western society, we live from mind, and everything in our environment is labeled. And we categorize things all the time. We're sizing up things all the time and making comparison. And it's living in this mind state, that's completely cut off from nature. And it's not living in the body. So that's why it's no wonder we have this anxiety, because we're so disconnected from the body, and it's like, oh gosh, what am I gonna feel when I finally, surrender to the body? What's it actually going to say? So I think that's also where the fear comes in because we've been disconnected for such a long time. You can just, feel your heartbeat,
Mm.
just and notice it with a curiosity. Okay, what does it feel like there in my chest? The rising and falling of your chest when you breathe. Just noticing that, you know. You can even check in and do body scans on yourself throughout the day. So, what do my toes feel like in my shoes right now? What does my feet feel like? Can I feel the pressure of the chair that I'm sitting in? And it's just little things you can do to train your attention back into your body. And I've realized, the subconscious mind is actually the body. And that holds your body is the recording device, truly, for everything that you've experienced. So, and this is what I've been learning through healing disease in my body and actually living a healthier life and eating foods that are more in alignment with my body. And I'm realizing that, my goodness, the body records everything. So anxiety is not stored in the mind; it's stored in the cells of your body. The PTSD I experienced, it wasn't in my mind, it was literally sensation in my body. So we have the labels, the PTSD, anxiety, depression, but they all exist as sensations in the body.
What an insight! I'd met a little bit of that, but that makes so much sense, doesn't it? Because our body is the only way that we can actually interact with the world, through our senses, which are all physical. Our body picks up energy, picks up vibration, sound, heat, touch, smell. So it makes sense. It's certainly the interface between that and the mind. So it's got to be stored somewhere.
Absolutely. I had a very interesting conversation. I'll share with you a little bit. I was speaking to my cousin this weekend, who is a doctor, and I explained to him about sound, vibration, and frequency. And anyways, on the drive there, I was listening to a composer, a piece of music that really moved me and I cried. It moved me so much. But it was in a different language I didn't understand. but I didn't have to understand in order
Mm.
for that piece of music to move me. So, on some level, on some physiological level, I understood exactly what that piece of music meant. I didn't have to necessarily, with the mind, understand the words.
You're talking about enriching experience, aren't you? It
Hmm.
it really is. It's using. I love it because you're using your whole body for experiencing. Yeah. So touch, smell, sound, and that just, yeah, you've blown my mind with this conversation. I think that is absolutely incredible. Brings
I
a whole new
think
meaning to tantric, doesn't it? Because that's all about
it does.
using your senses. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I've realized that like the whole body is, it's a device. It truly is. It's a device, and then the mind is the ally, but your being, which is beyond that, sort of directs all these different parts in order for you to do what you need to do. But I also realized that because I was psychic, I mean, you have to be really sensitive to sense subtle energy, and I was doing that from a young age. And I realized that my body was picking up these signals. It wasn't coming from my mind, it was my body picking up slight fluctuations in
Mm.
energy from other people, from the environment that I was in, and words from people. So it was almost like I was hyper attuned to a different kind of awareness.
I think that's fascinating, and that makes sense, doesn't it? When you're having an experience, you get goosebumps. What are those
Absolutely.
apart from sensing something? There is a real visceral reaction to something. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Wow.
smoking as well, right? So this just popped in, but like smoking as well. I mean, it's that need for release when you're stressed, right? So you light up a cigarette, but it's the act of like pulling something into your lungs, where actually your body's wanting more oxygen, so that it can process what it needs to process, and release what it needs to release.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember post post rehab when I was making sense of things. I had a plan A and a plan B. The plan A was alcohol, which obviously I wasn't doing, and plan B was breathe. And so there were times I was driving back home from Cape Town and I need a drink. Traffic's terrible, this, that, and the other. If I actually get off the road, it'll take me 15 minutes to find a bottle store. I'll get wound up, so wound up, or I can breathe. I can do that now in the car because we're stationary. And that was it, three
Mm.
breaths. And I didn't need that intake of alcohol, the intake of the cigarette. I needed that air bringing in.
Absolutely. You needed
Yeah.
more oxygen in your
Mm,
cells. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow, amazing.
Mm,
Isn't it that it's that, right? We're always trying to avoid our being or being connected to ourselves in some way. And so we're always searching for something else so that we can just avoid
mm.
feeling.
So sad. So
Yeah.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Missing out on that
Absolutely.
authenticity, missing out on that richness from that need for attachment, external validation, and things like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Sorry. Got
Absolutely.
got a cough. Right. Earlier on, you mentioned codependence. What was your understanding or how you got tied up in that issue or whatever you want? Yeah, I'll start that one again. Earlier on in our conversation, you talked about codependence. What is your sense of that and its requirement or that we are missing in ourselves?
Thank you for that, Hamish. I realized that that was the standard for relationship that I had based all my relationships and especially my romantic relationships upon. And I think it was much later. I think it was in my late 20s, maybe 30s, that I realized I was a love addict. And I was actually looking for my father in every relationship that I had. And I went from relationship to relationship being completely unsatisfied, and playing into codependence. And my idea for codependence now, or my idea of what it is the abandonment of self for something outside of me, a person, a thing, a circumstance that is not in service to me, that is not coming towards me as well. And I realized that it was last year actually, that was the last of my four awakenings. And it came through a relationship. And I had a relatively short relationship with this person, and we were seeing each other online. And I think it was the first time I actually I got the sense that someone could meet me on a spiritual level, because he was quite spiritual as well. And I've never had that in relationship before. 4 months in to the relationship, while he moved here, I ended it because I realized the dynamic that we were playing out was again based in codependence. So I felt like I couldn't truly keep myself or hold on to myself and hold on to another person in relationship. I always felt like I had to abandon myself or shrink myself in some way in order to fit into the relationship and to fit with the person that I was with. But then I would start feeling this sense of being caged, and feeling like I had no sense of freedom, and it wasn't enjoyable for me anymore. So I was really glad that I realized this after 4 months and not 4 years this time. And it was easier for me to get out of it. But I ended the relationship and I still felt this sense of not being resolved. Like I didn't understand the full mechanism as yet. I felt like there were pieces of the puzzle that still needed to come together. And I went for a walk, and there's this beautiful forest that I walk in, and it's not too far from where I live. And walking in the forest, it was almost like blinkers came off my eyes, and I was shown the entire pattern, how it plays out, and the core wound underneath that. And the core wound was actually self abandonment. But it's a pattern that I was trained into from my childhood home, being abused. I learned how to self sabotage and self abandon. And I realized that the part of me that was self abandoning was the child that didn't get the things that she needed as a little girl. So I went on this whole other level of self healing and committing to myself in a way that I had never committed to myself before. And it shifted me on such a grand scale, that I restarted my business, which, well, I started in 2022, but I recommitted to it in a very different way. And I started coaching and showing up to coaching and the people that I coach in a very, very different way. And it was this whole other level of Nirushka that I accessed.
There's a question that intrigues me. You said that you were looking for your father in your relationships. Explain that logic to me, because you said he was not a pleasant man. So why were you looking for him in your men?
So I think it was looking for what I didn't get from him. That I was looking to these partners to help me create, But I mean, the wound itself was drawing in partners that were going to show me the opposite of that. The irony. So, I mean, my dad was very abusive and neglectful. And I realized that I was I really longed to have a dad who see me, and not only see me, but love me and make time for me, and was gentle with me and protective of me and cared enough to give me, good, healthy boundaries. And there was this whole side of the masculine that I felt I didn't get. and I didn't understand. So I dated men hoping that they would be that for me, you know. And I think this is what we do in relationships, and especially codependent relationships, because we're coming from that wound of,
Mm.
having a mother who didn't really see us. And so it's like the little boy looking for mommy, and then the wounded little girl who didn't get this healthy father figure looking for a dad in
Mm.
relationship. And it's a perfect match, but it's disastrous, but
Mm.
it's a wound that's asking to be healed.
I think that's beautiful. I think it really is, isn't it? And it's okay is the only answer. It's absolutely okay until you have that awareness, which you did get, which people do get eventually, of why am I always meeting the same man or the same woman? Why are we going through the same patterns and behaviors? Because you haven't looked for something else. You haven't realized you're looking for that same dynamic. And that's just what we, as you said, that's just what we do until we suddenly realize and the penny drops. And then hopefully the next relationship is completely different. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I realized I had a type, and the type was like the musician accountant type, which was my dad, you know. And I thought, oh my goodness, when I looked back, it's like, oh gosh, I've been trying to recreate this relationship with my father.
Mm.
But also, what came through my healing, the change in relationship dynamic, was realizing that my father was just a human being like everybody else, and he had his own wounding and his own trauma, which he couldn't look at. But there was this
Mm.
also there was this beautiful side to him as well.
Yeah.
And when I started focusing more on the beauty of who he was, as a being, as a whole being on his own, and not my father, but just actually a person, I started forgiving him on a very different level, and that set me free from that, or wanting to recreate that whole loop again.
I think you've definitely nailed something really, really important. It is that forgiveness. It is that forgiveness for another person's behavior and forgiving yourself for falling into those patterns, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like forgiveness is a huge part in the healing process, and, creating new patterns and healthier patterns.
I think it's quite important to add that it doesn't mean letting them off the hook. It doesn't mean
Absolutely.
accepting behavior at all. And it does mean you actually have to put in boundaries, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. 100%. But I also think that the boundaries are not so much an external thing, but it's that knowing that the value within you, knowing yourself and understanding that I am valuable, I hold value. And because I acknowledge that I'm valuable, I'm not going to engage in these behaviors, and I'm not going to tolerate this behavior from other people either.
Yep. I think that is the best boundary, isn't it? It's not about keeping them away. It's about keeping
Hmm.
yourself safe and what
Yeah,
what happens and what doesn't. Yeah. I
absolutely.
think that's I think that is truly remarkable. And it is a process. It is a slow process. And it does require that forgiveness, because if you're not going to forgive anyone, not going to forgive, you're carrying all that anger and resentment and he did this to me, she did this to me. You're carrying it and you
Hmm.
can't actually see because you're weighed down by all of that noise, all of that weight of the past. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And not only that, like, another part in my awakening actually made me realize the impact that the negative emotions have on the organs in our body and on our health.
Mm.
Not just, it's not just your mental state, but it's having an impact on the cells of your body. You're actually destroying your health that way.
That's another topic for another conversation, isn't it? Very
Yeah.
much. I don't know why I'm struggling today, because it's not as if there's nothing. I think you. No, I don't think you have. This has been. I'm actually going to wrap it up because what we've got is so fabulous. We really don't need to go down anywhere else, because I think this is super. I need to go and sit under a tree for a day, I think. I
It's a
really,
great
really do.
goal.
Just to listen, yeah, and just feel uncomfortable for a bit, yeah. Nirushka, I think this has been an incredible conversation. I'm going to sit down under a tree and think. You've given me so much to think about, so much to dwell on, and I mean, it's just been a beautiful conversation. So thank you.
Hamish, thank you so much for your time and for allowing me this space. I've been wanting to speak, I've been wanting to share, and it's been magical to be able to do that with you. For someone who's also walked his own journey, and experienced so many things. And it is quite a bit to integrate, and it's stuff that I've been integrating for years as well.
Mm.
So I'm happy to share. Thank you for giving me the space.
Well, I think you've done an amazing job, and I think anyone who listens to this is going to have to go and sit down under a tree and make sense of things, and just get curious, because you've just encouraged curiosity with zero judgment and forgiveness, and I think those are, as you said, those are so important. And I just love what you said.
Awesome.
Where
Thank you.
where can sorry, where can people find out more about you? Because you've got so much to share when it comes to helping people.
So people can go to nirushka.com. It's nirushka.com. And you can go read up. That's my website. You can go read up about me. I've got a blog. You can go read all my blog posts, and you can sign up to my newsletter. I've also got a little free ebook where you can go download, especially if you're starting out on creating and building a relationship with yourself. It's a neat little guide that accompanies you on your journey. And then my most recent little ad is a self-abandonment quiz. It's completely free. You can go click on it, you can take the quiz and see where you are with self-abandoning.
Brilliant. Well, I'll make sure all those go in the notes, and I'm going to download your ebook for sure there. Yeah.
Cool.
Lovely. And then one last question, which is very, very important. What is the superpower that you got from any or all four of your awakenings?
So that's a big one. And it's the ability to feel truth. And I've realized this with my clients as well. It's almost like I can see through the layers, and I can see through the heart of something, and sometimes the distortion that overlays truth. So I would say it would be.
I love that. And because so much of our conversation has been about the body, when you said that, I feel the truth, it gave me goosebumps, and I can feel the truth as it comes. I think that is really super. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. My coaching, I actually called my coaching feeling in, because that's literally what I do. It's like feeling into someone.
Well, Nirushka, thank you ever so much for today. I've enjoyed this, as I've said, and I'm pretty sure my listeners will thoroughly enjoy this as well. So thank you so much.
Hamish, thank you so much for creating this space, for allowing me to speak, and for inviting me to join you. It's been amazing, and to get to know you as well and hear your story.
Brilliant. Well, have a lovely day and take care. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Crucible, Conversations for the Curious. If these powerful stories of transformation resonated with you, be sure to like, subscribe and share this show with anyone who you think could do with a dose of inspiration for their own journey. I would really appreciate it if you could make any comments on your favourite podcast platform as well. That helps me reach more people. All the important links and information are in the show notes below. Thank you very much for listening, and catch up with you soon.